Hey everybody, I'm Andrew from the Flutter team, and today I'm going to talk with you about A2UI, Generative UI, and how you can use both of those things to connect agents with users in ways they'll love. The users will love, the agents, I guess, are just cool with it. So, let me start with a question. How many of y'all are seeing more and more apps that look like this? A big window of content and UI with a little sparkle in the corner. A little button that you tap on to open a chat with some kind of an agent. And if that agent could speak for itself, it might say something like this, right? We invest so much time and money building these agents that can do amazing things, and they are amazing, but all that magic gets crammed into the corner. What I'd like is an experience in which it feels like that agent is sitting next to me, looking at the same screen that I am, able to interact with the UI on my behalf, and being a real partner. Instead, most of the time I'm having an isolated, text-based chat with an agent that can recalculate celestial orbits for the known universe, but can't tap a button for me, even though it's only 100 pixels away. GenUI is the solution to that problem. In the next few minutes, we're going to talk all about it. Everybody ready? Okay, step one, what is it? GenUI brings the composition and state of the user interface into the agent's context. That means that your agent is not only generating content, but also reasoning about the best way to make that content interactive and delightful for the user. In the process of doing so, that separation between the agent and the UI that can hamper the user experience is eliminated. Not only can the agent create UI that's just right for a given user and context, but it knows what's on the screen and it can interact with those components. We'll also be talking a bit about A2UI. It's an open protocol that defines how an agent and a client can talk to each other about UI composition, data, and events. One of my favorite things about it is that it's just text. It is JSON blocks included in the conversation your app is already having with the agent. Here's an example from a workout companion app I've been building. This is a response from the agent after I asked it to create a workout plan for me. You can see there's some regular text in there, but then it switches into JSON, and there are these blocks of instructions that tell the app to instantiate surfaces and display them. Now, you might be wondering, why JSON? The answer really boils down to security, speed, and scale. JSON is secure because it doesn't carry executable code. It's just data. JSON's fast because LLMs are good at generating it, and clients are fast at parsing it. And finally, JSON scales well because almost every programming language and framework understands it. There are A2UI renderers for Angular, React, Flutter, Lit, and both Kotlin and Swift are being worked on now. The goal is to make sure A2UI can work on all surfaces that are important to you. And that's why GenUI is designed to be an ecosystem, rather than just one opinionated solution. The core layer is the A2UI protocol that teaches agents how to speak UI to clients. Agents comprise the second layer. If you're building your agents with Python, there's an A2UI agent library for Python, which we tested with ADK. Then you have client libraries that provide a runtime for A2UI. These interpret A2UI messages and events. Finally, the framework layer provides adapters for specific UI frameworks, such as Flutter, React, and so on. So, what can you do with that ecosystem? Once you start building with GenUI, what can your designers start asking you to do? As I mentioned before, a quick definition of GenUI is an agent that can generate UI rather than relying solely on text. If the agent wants the user to pick one of three choices, it can just make some buttons. But having an agent composing an app's UI also opens up some interesting non-conversational UX possibilities. For example, most of the apps we use have a static hierarchy of screens and routes determined before the app even ships. And when you use one of these apps, you frequently need to map whatever you're trying to do into a journey through those screens. But if there's an agent composing my experience based on my context in that moment, it can just assemble the components I need to reach my goal right there in a single screen. I can also collaborate with an agent that knows how I'm seeing the thing that we're collaborating on. This is a to-do list app from our new Intro to GenUI codelab, featuring a pinned list at the top and a conversation with an agent at the bottom, giving me 2 ways to work on my list. I can talk with an agent that understands mark off all the yard work tasks and can update the UI state to match, or I can tap a checkbox and the agent will know that I checked off that task. Okay, So let's talk about some of the fundamentals to how all this works at the app and agent level. I'm using Flutter, of course, because that's my personal jam, but these apply to other languages and frameworks as well. First up is transport. My app needs a way to look at the tokens coming from the agent and figure out which ones represent A2UI messages and which ones don't, and then parse the info appropriately. Transport handles that part. Next is the catalog. This is a set of definitions for UI components that the agent is allowed to use. The data model is a centralized, observable store for the data that backs the UI. If the agent wants to create a UI component, the data that component will display goes into the data model. Once created, that UI component goes into a surface. This is just a location that you designate in your app where you want generated UI to be displayed. To control all those surfaces, there's a surface controller. It manages the state of each surface, when they're created, when they're destroyed, and triggers updates when the data model changes. Finally, there's the conversation. This is a facade class that ties together the transport and the surface controller to give you a single clean API to code against. All right, so let's get into some code and see these building blocks in action. All right, so here's my app. It's a very typical text-only chatbot. I like climbing, and it's going to give me information about climbing locations near where I am. And these are being pulled from a tool using just a hard-coded local database. I'm going to say, tell me about some easy climbing locations. Let Gemini work on that. There we go. And so I get a nice response here. I got some useful text. This is formatted in Markdown that's getting displayed correctly. And it's using data, again, from a tool call that I've offered the agent from a local database. So it's using my own data here. And it is a lot of text, though, right? And my only way of requesting more information about one of these is to come in here and type out another question, right? So tell me more about, let's say, Lone Mountain. Gemini's going to chew on that for a minute, and there we go. So now I get more text, right? This is probably pretty similar to apps that you've seen before. It's just a whole lot of this where it gives me a bunch of text, I respond with some text, and I can get useful information. I can have a very, very useful experience, but we can do a little bit better than this. I'm going to flip over to another copy of the code, and this one has the GenUI package baked into it. Let's try that one and see what we get. So now I'm going to rerun this app, and we'll see how it works. I'm going to give it the same question I gave it before. So tell me, actually not a question, more of a command, about some easy climbing locations. And now when I get a response, the agent's going to know that it can ask me to create UI components. It can ask the app to create UI components to display data. So it gave me a little bit of text there. Whoa, and there we go. There's a whole bunch. And so you can see, a little bit different now. Still not the, greatest designed app at the moment. We'll get to that in a second. But I've got real UI components here. I've got text widgets. I've got a card that's going on and some other stuff. I can even, there's even a button that I can click on now and interact with it to request more information about one of these locations. There we go. So I got more information on Calico Hills. And so again, this is same app. All I've really done here, and we'll get into it in just a second, is to integrate the GenUI package and then connect up those building blocks that you just saw me describe. So let's take a look at that. Let's start off in the pub spec here. Here we go. So I've got the GenUI package. This is a Flutter pub spec. If you've never seen one before, I've got the GenUI package in there with the latest version, which is 0.9. And a few other things, nothing fancy. All right, let's take a look at transport. This is one of those 6 fundamental concepts we were just looking at. And in here, in this class, I've got an A2UI transport adapter. This is a built-in class that comes with the GenUI package, and it offers ways to get information into and out of the package and its sort of library of classes. I'm using Dartantic, by the way. This is, if you're familiar with Pydantic, you may have heard of that library. Dartantic is a Dart library that's open source and inspired by Pydantic. The adapter class, like I said, it offers ways to get information into and out of the GenUI system. Specifically, it allows me to define the send request method. So the GenUI package has a bring your own model approach. And so you have a lot of freedom to set up your agent from whatever provider you choose, set it up however you like. And then you're responsible for wiring it up, basically, so that information from the agent gets into the GenUI package libraries, and messages that the GenUI package libraries need to send get out and make it to the agent. And so this send request method is how that happens. And so it's called whenever GenUI wants to send a message to the agent. So you can see here, my job is to take information from GenUI, give it to Dartantic. So I'm just creating a string buffer here called buffer. And then I'm looking through this chat message that I got from GenUI, and I'm just taking the parts out of it and writing them into that string buffer. So again, it's all just tokens at the end of the day. So it's going straight into a string. And then it gets added here to the history, the ongoing conversation with the agent through Dartantic. And then right here, you can see where that gets sent off. So send stream goes off, and then the response comes back as a stream. And right here is where it gets fed back into the GenUI package. My favorite API name in the whole thing is add chunk. I just get a little chuckle out of that every time I see it. But as information, again, this is streaming. We're talking to an agent. So as information's coming back from that agent, chunks of it, literally, are fed back into the transport adapter. And as they stream in, the adapter is going to look through it to decide what's text, what's an A2UI message, and then react accordingly. All right, let's take a look at another one of those fundamental components, the catalog. Again, this is just a list of components that the agent is allowed to use when it wants to create UI. So in this version of the app, I'm just using the basic catalog. These are some components that come built into the GenUI package. They're fundamental A2UI components. And so I'm using that catalog, and I'm actually just taking out a few that I don't want to use. So I've removed image, video, and audio player. And I've also given a system prompt fragment to the agent. So this is pretty important. You need to give your agent guidance on how you want it to compose UI, because it's a new responsibility that it has. So I've got things in here about if you're doing this, use this component, things like that will help the agent compose the UI the way I like it to. So again, that catalog, list of components, and some information on how to use it. Next, we have the prompt builder. The prompt builder's job is to take that catalog, take any system prompt fragments that I have, instructing the agent. Here I've got, by the way, you're going to be a helpful assistant that chats with the user. And it assembles that all into one big prompt that I can conveniently send across to my agent. Finally, down here, I have the chat session. So you could store all this information you're about to see in a stateful widget. For a simple example, that's great. I've chosen here just to use a change notifier. If you're familiar with Flutter, you're probably pretty familiar with change notifier. This is where I'm going to keep all the state that sort of manages my conversation. So first up, an instance of that transport that you just saw me using. So I create one of those. I've also got a surface controller here. That's, again, another one of those core components. The surface controller is responsible for managing the state of surfaces for this displayed generated UI that's in my app, tracking when those are created, destroyed, when they need to be rebuilt, and so on. So I create that and I hand it the catalog. And then finally, I've got the conversation here. This is a convenience class that ties together the transport and the controller. And you'll see later in the code, the API that provides for things like events and stuff like that are very easy to code against compared to several objects at once. All right, further down, there are a few things to note here. The conversation does have an is-waiting state. So if you want to kind of lock down the send button to send one message at a time to the agent, you can do that. You can watch that state. You can also see I'm tracking a list of messages here. So this UI is conversational. So there's a chronology of it where I send a message or I do a thing and then the agent responds. To track that chronology, just using a simple list. So it'll get messages added to it that are from the user, but also from the agent. All right. And then down here, you can see where we're tracking some of the events that come out of the conversation. So the conversation object has a series of events that you can listen to. Most important right here are surface added and content received. We're also tracking errors in case they come up, but mostly we're interested in if the agent decides to create a surface, making sure that gets displayed, and if the agent decides to send just pure text, which it still can, that is also caught and added as a message into the conversation. All All right, so to display all of that UI, we have a message view widget and a message class. So each of these messages could either be a string of text from the user or from the agent, or it could be a generated surface, which would have a surface ID that comes from the agent. So the message class just sort of encapsulates that data one way or the other. And then we have a stateless widget called message view that displays the right UI based on what's in the message. So if it's a bit of text here, it just returns a markdown body. And if it's a generated surface, then we'll use the surface widget. Surface takes a single important parameter here, surface context. Each generated surface has a context that's tracked by that surface controller. And so all that's going on here is saying, okay, give me the context for this surface ID, and it's going to be rendered in this surface. And that way it's connected to the surface controller. If the widget needs to be rebuilt or something like that, the surface controller can fire off an update. And so that's a breakdown about how this version of the GenUI app works, right? So instead of just having text, we've got both text and generated surfaces coming from the agent, and everything's wired up to make sure those things go into this list view and then get displayed to the user using either markdown body widgets or surfaces. Okay, so as I said before, the design here isn't the greatest, but we've got interactivity, right? I don't have a wall of text anymore. I've got real application UI, buttons I can tap on, things like that, cards and shadows and stuff. I'm not locked into that wall of text like I was before. That said, we can make this look a little bit better. We can also provide some guardrails at the same time. So let's take a look at adding a custom catalog item that we can give the agent to display data the way we want it displayed and with the sort of security guardrails that we'd like it to have. All right, so here we are in the, I think, third version of this application that I've got going, and we're looking at a custom catalog item definition, one called climbing location item. So again, this is something that we're going to use to give the agent the power to create a new bespoke catalog item, one that doesn't ship with the GenUI package. And we got some properties in here to take note of. So one is the name, climbing location. This is going to be used in the system instruction to let the agent know when to use this catalog item. There's also a data schema here. This is defined using APIs from the JSON schema builder package, which ships with the GenUI package. And it defines the shape of data that the agent needs to provide in order to instantiate it. And it also includes a description. So here's a basic description that says, hey, this is what this catalog item is meant to do. This is what it can do. And here are the properties that you need to provide, agent, when you want to instantiate one. And you can see identifier here is also marked as required. So here we're telling the agent, if you want to show one of these cards, provide the identifier for one of the locations, and the widget will do the rest. And we're doing this for a particular reason. So the app has a database of sort of mock locations, climbing locations in it. And this is an example of how to separate out which state you want the agent to really handle and what should come from a non-agentic source. So these are guardrails that you as a developer can put into place about what data the agent needs to be aware of and what data it doesn't. So again, that's the schema. That's what the agent's going to give to the app whenever it wants to instantiate one of these climbing locations. And then here we have a widget builder, which if you've used Flutter, you are probably very, very familiar with. And it's going to get an item context here that includes a lot of data and other contextual information about the surface that's being created, the data that was provided for that surface that's now in that data model, one of those other fundamental components we talked about. So you can see here, it's pulling data right out of that item context and the data model saying, hey, give me that identifier that you promised me you would give me. The app is then going to go look in its internal, and it's a demo, so it's hard-coded, but internal database of climbing locations to find the rest of the data. And again, this is an example of how to set guardrails. The agent doesn't need to necessarily have all of this data going through its context window and stuff like that. It can reside here on the client and then get merged together at the right moment. So if the app doesn't find a location that matches, it returns a simple error. But if it does, then it goes ahead and builds a climbing location widget using the right information. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Climbing location's a stateless widget. It's lovely. It composes a UI from basic widgets, like all Flutter widgets do. But otherwise, it's not that interesting. It's just displaying some data in a nice way. More interesting up here is this, on more details. So one of the parameters taken by climbing location is a callback for when the user presses that button. That sort of like, I want to explore this one more. In the previous example, the agent was handling all of that. It was creating the button. It was creating the callback for us. Here, because we're defining the catalog item, We are responsible for making sure that button does something. And so we're firing off a user action event. This is a built-in class in the GenUI package that can be used to tell the agent, hey, the user's just done something that you're going to want to know about. And so in this case, we're just using a void callback, basically, on more details. And so when the user clicks that button, we're going to create a user action event. We'll give it a name. We'll give it the source component so that the agent knows which button generated this event. And then we'll give it some context. And this is all just information that we've decided we want the agent to have. This is just the context we think the agent needs to properly process this event. So we're giving it the identifier of the location, and we're saying, hey, the user wants to know more about this. So with all that in place, let's take a look at what it looks like. All right, so far not much has changed. Let me go ahead and give it the same query. And we'll see what the agent comes up with. All right, so there's some text that it responded with right away. Oh, yep, there's a whole bunch of catalog items. And there we go. So you can see now we have some of that same information, but it's being displayed in the way that we want it displayed, and with the guardrails that we put in place for where the information's coming from. There we go. And let's take a tour of this Explore location where we got origin, climbing, and fitness. We hit Explore location. It's going to scroll down, and we'll see the agent respond. There we go. And of course, it's fallen back here to just using basic catalog items because we haven't given it a custom catalog item for more information, but we certainly could. But there you go. That's our demo. That's 3 versions of the same app. One is basically a wall of text chatbot, one that's a basic GenUI integration, and then one where we've come in and given the agent a lot of guidance and a lot of tools to produce the experience that we want our users to have. Okay, so there's our live coding. GenUI is still kind of a new thing, but it's also very much launched. A2UI is published, the packages you just saw me using are available right now, and folks are building with it. For example, we turned the coffee bar at I/O into a print shop with GenLatte, an app that guides users through ordering coffee with a custom-generated image of the user's happy place printed onto their drink. The folks at Very Good Ventures also built VGV Finances, a demo showing how GenUI experiences can adapt to different users. You tell it what kind of investor you are and what goals you have, and it builds an interview tailored to those goals. We've got an open source party planning app as well that combines Flutter with Python and ADK to produce an experience that walks hosts through creating an event with customized invitations that guests can fill out. GenUI is also starting to appear more and more in the app and Play stores. This is Finish It, a Finnish language learning app from Chatajulasoi. You tell it what you want to learn, and it creates customized lessons with just the right UI to get you where you want to go. So we're almost done, but before I let you go, I'd love to touch on some things that we think are coming. New patterns that devs and users can expect to start expecting from their apps. One is UI that's smaller and more focused. Autofills on things like order forms are great, but you know what's even better? Not seeing those fields in the first place. If I'm going through an order form with an agent and it has the right context and the ability to generate UI to match, 3 pages of an order form could be condensed into just a few fields that I need. Personalization over time is another example. I recently started getting in shape, and my main goal when I work out is just to avoid hurting myself. So I like a lot of explanations of how the exercises work. For a more advanced user of an app, though, that's wasted space. An agent that's creating the UI can understand my goal and the way I've interacted with the app over time, remember that, and create a UI composition that's just for me, making it easier for me to use the app. I talked a little bit earlier about how GenUI can turn a user flow like this one into one that looks like this. To create that composition, the agent is choosing at runtime from a catalog of components based on the context. It's effectively taking one path through a tree of possibilities, which means over time, your analytics can gather data about which paths work well, which one leads to a conversion, a happy user, whatever the goal is. You do that often enough, you have a lot of data that you could use to tune that agent, analyze what works and what doesn't, and then update your agent's guidance to hill climb your user experience. Okay, so that's A2UI, Flutter, and GenUI. I talked a little bit at the end there about things that might be coming in the future, but again, GenUI is a launched thing with open source tools you can start building with right now. You can find links to the A2UI website and Flutter's GenUI package in the description for this video, as well as a link to the Intro to GenUI codelab. If you've got a machine with Chrome on it, you are 60 minutes of coding and a download away from having a working app and a hands-on understanding of A2UI and GenUI. So check those out, and we'll see you next time.